On March 14th, the Wasatch Reservoir outside Salt Lake City dropped 3 feet of water in 8 hours. No scheduled release, no rupture, no earthquake, just gone. I work for the Water Authority, 12 years inspecting secondary systems. The backup infrastructure nobody thinks about, routine work, honest work. But when my supervisor Marcus called at 6 in the morning, his voice was wrong. "Get out here," he said, "and don't tell anyone what you see." I was at the East Access Road by 7:30, coffee still steaming. The Oquirrh Mountains sharp against a cold, clear sky. The reservoir was low, too low, and standing in the middle of the drained basin, where the water should have been reflecting the sunrise, were old streetlights, submerged for decades, now exposed and turned on. Victorian-style lampposts, the kind you'd see in old photographs from the 1930s or 40s, maybe earlier. They lined what looked like a road or a path that had been underwater for God knows how long. 7 of them, arranged in a rough circle, all glowing with a soft amber light that had no business working after so many years underwater. Marcus was already at the observation point. He hadn't looked at me yet. "Tell me you see that," he said. "I see it. I've been here 12 years. Before that, my dad worked this site. He was here when they finished the dam in 1968. He never mentioned any lights. There's no record of any lights in the foundation surveys, the infrastructure reports, nothing." I pulled out my phone and took photographs. The lights were real, metal, glass, fixtures that belonged to some era before the reservoir was built. "We need to figure out where that water went," I said. "It didn't go anywhere," Marcus said. "The outlet gates are sealed. The drainage system shows no excess flow. The surrounding groundwater tables are stable. It's not leaking. It just evaporated, apparently, in the course of 8 hours, which violates every law of hydrology and thermodynamics I can think of." He'd called the main office. A structural engineer was coming from Salt Lake City around noon. "What about those lights?" I asked. "Don't mention those," Marcus said. It wasn't a request. He was 56, a solid man, practical, not prone to drama. He'd been my supervisor for 9 years. "Don't mention them, not in the report, not to the engineer, not to anyone in the department. I'm telling you this as someone who wants you to have a job next week." I didn't argue. I'd worked government long enough to understand that some things don't make it into official documentation. We spent the next 3 hours walking the perimeter, checking the dam face, taking measurements, photographing the structural integrity. The concrete was solid, no hairline fractures, no seepage. The spillway gates were closed and sealed with no signs of recent operation. The intake structures were intact. Everything was exactly as it should be, except for 3 feet of missing water and a set of Victorian streetlights sitting in the middle of the drained basin. The structural engineer arrived at noon. David Chen, professional, efficient. He spent 40 minutes examining the dam before declaring it sound. He didn't ask about the lights. Marcus didn't mention them. Neither did I. But before Chen left, he pulled me aside at the observation point. "You work the secondary systems?" "Yes." "You know about the intake records? The historical logs?" "I know they exist." He nodded slowly. "There's something in the 1968 construction reports, a brief section. It mentions that they had to remove some existing infrastructure from the basin before they filled it. Structures from an older community, a town that used to be here back in the early 1900s. They demolished most of it, but apparently some of the civic elements, the lights, some of the water fixtures, they decided to leave in place. The thinking was that it would cost more to remove them than to just bury them underwater. Why didn't the report mention the lights specifically? Because, Chen said, the report says the town was abandoned in 1919. There was never any documented decision to leave the lights standing. Someone should have removed them. But if the report mentioned specific infrastructure, then someone would ask why. So they didn't. He packed his equipment and drove back to Salt Lake City. The water level held steady for the next 2 days. 3 feet below normal, no further drop, no rise. The drainage systems showed nothing. The weather had been clear. No mechanism explained the drop, and nothing explained why it had stopped. On the 3rd day, the water started to come back. It rose gradually but steadily, climbing to near normal levels over about 36 hours. No rainfall, no scheduled release. Just the water rising on its own, as if something had opened a valve from somewhere below. The creek flow from the canyon hadn't increased. The groundwater contribution was normal. The water was just coming back. I noticed something else on the morning of the 4th day. I was down in the basin with Marcus, checking the gauge readings. The sun was low, the light soft and pale, and the streetlights, the Victorian ones, started to illuminate. First just a faint glow, then brighter, then fully illuminated. The amber gas lamp glow spreading across the concrete floor like a constellation. All 7 of them, operating on an electrical system with no source, no visible wiring, no power station anywhere in the chain. "Tell me you're seeing this," I said. Marcus didn't answer. He was writing in his inspection logbook, his pen moving steadily, his jaw tight. "Marcus, I'm seeing it," he said quietly. "I saw it last night too. It turned on at dusk and turned off at dawn. I came back here alone to confirm. That's what's happening. Every night those lights turn on. Every morning they turn off." "That's not possible." "No," Marcus agreed. "It's not." I asked him why he didn't call it in. He showed me his logbook. The entry was dated the previous night. It documented the light's illumination, the time, the duration, everything. Professional, clear, and completely absent from the official report he'd submitted that afternoon. That report said the reservoir had stabilized and was returning to normal operating parameters. Everything fine. "What happens if we tell them?" he asked. I didn't have a good answer. That night, I didn't sleep. Around 3 in the morning, I drove to the Water Authority building and started searching through the old construction files in the basement. Box after box. I found the 1968 report by 5 o'clock. Dense, technical. One section mentioned existing civic structures from the abandoned community of Walsenburg, established 1892, abandoned 1919. The recommendation was to leave non-essential infrastructure in place and cover it with reservoir fill. But attached to the back of the report was a handwritten memo, dated July of 1968, from the project superintendent to the county engineer. It said, "The lighting fixtures are to remain in place as installed. Do not alter, do not remove, do not attempt electrical connections. Maintain in sealed state. Water level must be maintained above apex of post assemblies at all times to ensure proper containment. If level drops below critical threshold, restore immediately. This is non-negotiable and must be communicated to all future Water Authority personnel with facility oversight." It was countersigned by someone from the State Historical Preservation Office. I copied it, photographed it, put the original back. The lights were meant to be underwater. The water level wasn't just supposed to stay where it was. It was supposed to stay high enough to cover them completely. And someone had decided not to mention this requirement beyond a handwritten note that probably cycled out of institutional memory around 1985. I called Marcus at 6 in the morning. "Did you know about this?" A long pause. "My father told me about 3 months before he retired. He said there was something in the files, something that had to stay buried, literally. The engineer in the 60s made a decision to leave the lights in place. There was a reason, something about the town's history, something about what the lights meant. But he wouldn't tell me. He just told me that if I worked at the reservoir, I should make sure the water level stayed where it was supposed to be." "And you never told anyone?" "Who would I tell? And what would I say? That the water level needs to stay high because of some mystery nobody wants to explain? You think I'd have a job if I started saying things like that?" I understood. Over the next week, I monitored the water level obsessively. Every morning and evening, 4 times a day, the level held steady. On the 8th day, I got a call from the main office. A woman named Sandra Kirkwood from administrative. She asked how I was doing, about my family, my work, whether I was experiencing any stress. "I'm fine, working a lot, but fine. Marcus mentioned you've been coming in early and staying late, running extra checks. That's not part of your standard rotation, is it?" "Just being thorough. After the water level drop, I wanted to make sure everything was stable." "Of course, but you might want to ease back. We don't want anyone burning out, and we also don't want any unofficial data being generated. You understand? Everything needs to go through standard channels." "Understood." After she hung up, I realized what had happened. Marcus had filed a report about my behavior. He'd documented my obsession, my unofficial checking. He'd given the administration exactly what they needed if they ever decided to remove me. He was protecting himself, and probably protecting me. That night, I stopped going to the reservoir early, stopped running extra checks, filed my reports on time with nothing unusual noted, went back to my routine. But I kept the photocopy of that memo in my desk at home, and I kept thinking about the phrase, proper containment. Containment of what? The lights themselves? Or something else that would break free if the level dropped too far? I started researching Walsenburg. The town existed from 1892 to 1919. A small agricultural community, maybe 200 people. Photographs online showed streets lined with those Victorian lights, buildings that looked prosperous. Then in 1919, it was abandoned. No fire, no flood, no economic collapse. 1 year, the town was there. The next year, the records simply stopped mentioning it. By 1920, the land had reverted to county ownership. By 1960, it was chosen for the reservoir. One historical society entry from 1985. Walsenburg was a planned community established by the Walsenburg Land Company, 1892 to 1919. Reason for abandonment unclear. 3 weeks after the water level dropped, I was called into Sandra's office. My personnel file sat thick on her desk. "I think it would be beneficial if you were transferred. Different site, different systems, Parley's Creek Station, closer to the city, better hours." I could refuse. But I'd seen what happened to people who insisted. When would I start? "Next week, Monday." I worked at Parley's Creek for 8 months. Decent work, simpler infrastructure, fewer mysteries. Home at a reasonable hour, saw my family. But something followed me. The photocopy of the 1968 memo, the one about proper containment, kept reappearing in my desk drawer. I threw it away 3 times. Every morning it was back, folded the same way, the paper warm to the touch. I kept checking the public water level data. The Wasatch Reservoir stayed normal, steady. No record of the drop. No record of the lights. In October, Marcus called. We met at a diner halfway between my new station and his house. He looked tired, older. I filed a retirement request. I'll be out by the end of the year. Are you okay? No, but I will be once I'm not responsible for that place anymore. He handed me a small leather journal from the 1960s. His father's handwriting filled the pages. He documented everything. Every odd water reading, every unexplained maintenance call, every anomaly. He thought that if the water level ever dropped again, someone should understand what was at stake. I read the journal that night. His father had spent 30 years watching that reservoir. A night in 1972, when the water level dropped for 6 hours. Strange electrical readings from the lights, measurements that shouldn't have been possible. A conversation with an older engineer who hinted that the lights were older than the town itself. That they'd been there before Walsenburg was ever built. That the town was established around them as a kind of protective structure. Later entries became less coherent. Dreams. Standing in the drain basin at night, seeing the lights on, and also seeing something else. Shapes, movement, something beneath the lights that his conscious mind couldn't process. By the 1980s, the entries stopped. The last one. I've done what I could. The next person will understand, or they won't. Either way, the water will stay where it needs to stay. For 2 months, nothing happened. I almost convinced myself it was over. Then December 1st, a Tuesday, my phone lit up with an alert from the reservoir's automated gauge. At 11 in the morning, Sandra called. Her voice was urgent. We need you back at Wasatch. Something's happened. Can you be there in 40 minutes? The water had dropped again, 6 feet in 4 hours. I drove north in silence. Cold, clear December day, hands tight on the steering wheel. When I arrived, 4 vehicles were in the parking area. Sandra's car, a maintenance truck, a dark sedan with government plates I didn't recognize, and an old unmarked truck that looked like it hadn't been serviced in years. Sandra waited at the observation point with a weathered man in his 50s. Behind him, walking across the exposed basin floor toward the lights, was someone in a full environmental suit. Sealed. Protected. This is Dr. Hendricks, Sandra said. State Geological Survey. Hendricks didn't offer to shake my hand. You worked here before. You observed the water level drop, and you saw the lights. Yes. Good. Then you know this isn't natural. The water level dropping like this, with no seepage, no spillage. That's not a hydraulic phenomenon. Come down and look. We walked down the concrete slope. The water had dropped 8 feet this time. More than the first drop. The basin floor was a landscape of concrete and metal and strange geometric arrangements. The 7 lights formed a perfect circle. In the center stood a structure I hadn't been able to see from the rim. Metal, cylindrical, about 8 feet tall, covered in rust and age. Panels on its side. Around the base, the concrete was stained, not with water, with something that might have been oil, or something oil had been trying to contain. What is that? We don't know exactly, Hendricks said. The records from the 1960s don't explain it, but based on the configuration and materials, it's some kind of containment system, built in the early 1900s, maybe earlier. What was it containing? The town of Walsenburg wasn't abandoned, Mr. Garrett. It was evacuated. There was an incident in 1919. Something happened with this structure. Someone decided the best solution was to flood the entire area and build a reservoir on top of it. Out of sight, managed water level to keep the structure submerged. I thought about Marcus's father's journal, the dreams about shapes beneath the lights. Your predecessor, Hendricks said, Marcus's father. He documented anomalies in the electrical readings from the lights, fluctuations that shouldn't have been possible if the lights were merely decorative. He theorized the lights were part of the system, designed to activate if the water level dropped below a certain threshold. Why would you want them to activate? Because the structure generates its own electrical field, not through conventional means. The lights draw power from that field, so if the water level drops enough for the lights to activate, it's a warning. Containment integrity is compromised. The technician called out from the base. A panel on the cylinder was open, forced outward from within. Hendricks and I walked over. Inside, mechanical components, but the angles were wrong. The scale was wrong. It looked designed by someone who understood engineering, but not human engineering. The panel has been forced open recently. Something damaged the seal. That's why the water level dropped. When containment is compromised, the structure automatically reduces pressure, drains the water to prevent catastrophic failure. Catastrophic failure of what? He didn't answer immediately. The technician photographed the interior. The damage looked deliberate, like something had pushed outward. Has anything unusual happened in your life recently? Anything you couldn't explain? People who work near these facilities sometimes report psychological effects, intrusive thoughts, dreams, compulsions. Your supervisor indicated you were showing signs. I didn't want to answer, but I'd come this far. I kept the water level readings every month, monitored them obsessively, researched the town, read Marcus's father's journal. Couldn't stop thinking about the lights. Knew it was irrational, but I couldn't stop. Hendricks nodded. The structure generates a field. Electromagnetic, but not exactly. It has a psychological component. People nearby for extended periods start to feel drawn to it. Become obsessed. Have dreams. It's a side effect of prolonged exposure to an anomalous field. So I was being influenced. Not controlled. Resonant. Your mind was trying to make sense of something that doesn't fit normal categories, so it created compulsions, obsessions, dreams. The technician called out again. Inside the damaged panel, etched into the metal, a date, 1887. The structure predates the town, Hendricks said, quietly. Walsenburg was founded in 1892. This thing was already here, already functional when the town was built around it. Someone made a deliberate choice to establish a community at this location, to use the town as a cover, a reason to fund the infrastructure necessary to manage the structure. Manage it how? The water level, the reservoir, the dam. All of it was built to maintain precise containment conditions. The town was the excuse. The real purpose was to keep that structure submerged at a specific depth with specific water pressure. I looked at the cylinder again. Smaller than I'd first thought, but its presence immense. The date seemed to vibrate in the air. Where did it come from? That's the question we're not going to answer. The administration has made it clear the scope of this investigation is limited to determining the cause of the water level drop and how to prevent it from happening again. I can tell you it's not going to appear in any official report. The technician and I will file a brief document about minor corrosion damage. The water level will be restored, the lights will go back underwater, and this facility will continue to operate exactly as it has for the past 60 years. But it's clearly not working. The containment is failing. Yes, and that's someone above my pay grade to deal with. He handed me a file folder. Inside, technical reports from the 1960s, correspondence, and a memo stamped "Confidential," dated 1919. It described an incident at the original facility location, an evacuation, a decision to construct a new containment system based on a design provided by an unnamed external party. Water-based containment was most reliable. The object generated a field that could be dampened by water immersion, essential to prevent uncontrolled manifestation. At the bottom, in handwriting matching the 1968 memo, the community around this site has demonstrated psychological sensitivity to proximity effects. Recommend remote location with water cover and minimum personnel exposure. Walsenburg hadn't been evacuated because something broke. It had been evacuated because living near the structure was harmful. It made people dream, obsess, unable to function normally. "Keep that," Hendricks said. "The administration knows about your exposure. You're not going back to Wasatch. You'll remain at Parley's Creek. Your personnel file will make no mention of psychological effects. As far as the official record, you were transferred because of workload optimization. Why are you telling me this? Because you should understand what you experienced. Because you deserve to know you weren't losing your mind. And because the next person who works at that facility won't have this knowledge. They'll just experience the compulsion, the dreams, and they'll think they're going crazy." The sun was descending. The water level was already rising slowly, visibly, creeping back into the basin. The lights remained visible for a few moments longer. Then the water covered them. Sandra was waiting at the top with a new assignment folder. A promotion. Supervisory position at the State Administrative Office. Overseeing multiple reservoirs. Better pay. Access to historical records. Close enough to Wasatch to check on it myself. A perfect placement. Inside the system, inside the institutional knowledge, close enough to understand what was happening, but powerless to prevent it. I accepted the position. I moved into a new office in Salt Lake City. No windows facing east, no sight lines toward the mountains. I received monthly water level reports for every facility under my oversight, filed them, maintained the records. But I kept Hendricks's documents, Marcus's father's journal, the photocopy of the 1968 memo, and every month when the Wasatch Reservoir data crossed my desk, I checked the water level with the precision of someone who knows exactly what happens when it drops. 3 years passed. Normal operations, normal reports. I trained a new supervisor for Wasatch. A younger man named David, competent, practical, not the type to ask too many questions. I made sure his orientation was thorough. I made sure he understood the importance of monitoring the water level. I made sure he knew that if anything unusual happened, he should report it immediately to me personally, not through normal channels. Then, on a Tuesday in March, exactly 4 years after the first drop, the Wasatch Reservoir lost water again, 8 feet in 6 hours. David's voice was calm, but I could hear the fear underneath. "The level's dropping. I don't understand why. Everything shows normal, but the water's just going." "I know. I'll be there in an hour. Don't tell anyone. Just monitor it." The drive north felt longer this time. The mountains appeared. The basin appeared. Through the observation glass, I could see the water level dropped. The structure visible again. The lights ready to come on. This time, I went down to the basin alone. No permission. Just walked down the slope, boots crunching on concrete, toward the cylinder with the date 1887 etched into its side. A new panel was open. A different section, forced outward by pressure from within. Through the opening, I saw something that made my mind struggle to process. Not mechanical, organic, or it had been organic once. Shape and texture, something that might have been moving, though whether it was actually moving or whether my perception was being affected by proximity to the field, I couldn't tell. It was attempting to emerge. The structure designed to contain it was failing. Slowly, methodically, it was working its way out. I felt no fear, no revulsion, just the recognition that I was looking at something that didn't belong to any category of living or manufactured thing I had words for. I understood then what the field did, why it made people dream, why it made them obsess. The structure wasn't just containing something, it was communicating, reaching out through every mechanism it had, trying to tell whoever was near that it was here, that it had been here since before the town was built, that it wanted to be known. I photographed the opening, documented everything I could see. Then I called Hendricks. The structure's failing, it's pushing outward. There's something inside it, and it's trying to get out. How long until catastrophic breach? Days, maybe, weeks at most. Don't tell anyone. Call me back in 1 hour. The water level continued to rise as I waited, not from any external source, but from somewhere beneath the structure. The containment system was reversing itself, pushing water back into the reservoir. By the time the water reached normal level, I could still see the open panel, still see the edge of whatever was trying to emerge. Hendricks called back in exactly 1 hour. We have a facility 40 miles from your location, not on any official map, maintained by a private contractor for 98 years. The structure you're looking at was a prototype, a test of water-based containment. The answer appears to be yes, but only if the water level is maintained precisely. If it drops below a critical point, the structure destabilizes. What's actually in there? I don't have that answer. The people who designed the containment system are long dead. Their records are classified above my clearance, but I can tell you this, it's not from this facility. It's something that was brought here, something that arrived a long time ago. Someone decided water-based containment was the best way to manage it. What happens now? You continue to monitor the facility. Maintain the water level as specified in the historical records. If the level drops again, contact me immediately. Don't tell the administration. Don't try to evacuate or alert emergency services. Just maintain the system and report to me. Can you do that? I could. I had no choice. I was part of the system now. Part of the institutional knowledge. Part of the structure of containment. The only person in the water authority who understood what was at stake. Yes. The water level at Wasatch stabilized for 6 months. I checked it weekly, then monthly, then back to the standard quarterly rotation, reviewed reports, filed documents, attended meetings about capacity planning and maintenance schedules. On the surface, everything was normal. One evening in late May, David called. His voice was thinner, like he was calling from very far away. I'm seeing things. In the basin, at night. The lights come on, and I see them. I shouldn't be seeing them. The water should cover them. But I see them anyway. Are you still at the facility? No, I'm at home. I drove away, but I can still see them. Every time I close my eyes, I see the lights, and something beneath them, something moving. I told him to see a doctor. To talk to someone, to do all the things that would eventually build a file around him, documentation of instability, a careful removal from the system. I told him what people tell people when they're trying to protect them from the machinery they've already become part of. He hung up. I never heard from him again. The next month, a new supervisor was assigned to Wasatch. Robert, solid, would keep his head down and do what he was told. I wondered how long before he started seeing things too. before the field began working on him the way it had worked on Marcus's father, the way it had worked on me. Before he understood that he'd been appointed not because he was qualified, but because someone had to be there to watch, to maintain, to keep the secret. In June, I went back to the reservoir for the first time since the water had begun to rise. I didn't announce myself, just drove there on a Saturday morning, parked in the empty lot, and walked to the observation point. The water level was perfect, normal. The lights completely submerged, invisible beneath the surface. To anyone looking for the first time, it would appear to be nothing more than a body of water, managed by a utility company, serving a city that had no idea what lay beneath. But I knew. And standing there, watching the water reflect the mountain peaks, I felt something shift. Not fear, something closer to acceptance. This was my life now. The choice to understand had become the choice to carry the weight. There was no going back. I pulled out Marcus's father's journal and added a page. I wrote about the water level drop in December, about the structure beneath the lights, about Hendricks' visit, about David's phone call and his removal. And at the end, I wrote, "The lights will activate again, not immediately, but within 3 to 5 years. When they do, there will be a new supervisor here, and the cycle will continue. Someone will have to carry the knowledge forward. That is what this job has always been. Not to fix the problem, not to expose it, not to save anyone. Just to know. Just to carry the weight and pass it on. The reservoir is stable now. The water level is where it should be. The lights are dark and submerged and waiting, as they have been waiting for over 100 years. I sit in my office in Salt Lake City, reviewing reports and records that no one else understands, carrying a secret that cannot be spoken. And somewhere beneath the water, something older than the town, older than the city, older than the systems we built to contain it, continues its slow, patient work of breaking free.